Ever wonder how people thought about things like miracles and faith healing before modern medicine was everywhere? Well, today we're going to step back in time. We're diving into a really fascinating chapter from an 1882 book called The Ministry of Healing to get our heads around a very specific and to us a pretty striking point of view. All right, let's jump right in.
So right up front, our goal here isn't to prove or disprove anything. We're just here to unpack the arguments and the perspective of the author as he laid them out almost 150 years ago. Think of this as opening a window into a totally different world of thought.
So here's our roadmap. We're going to look at some personal stories of healing, then dig into why the author thinks these miracles happen. After that, we'll tackle the tricky idea of counterfeit wonders, figure out how he tells the difference, and wrap it all up with a pretty intense prayer. So, to build his case, the author doesn't start with some dense theology. Nope. He starts with stories, really vivid, personal accounts from missionaries out in the field.
The first big piece of evidence he presents comes from a Reverend Albert Norton, a missionary over in India. It's 1879, and Norton is facing a life-threatening illness, completely cut off from what we'd consider modern medical help.
And the description of his condition is, well, it's brutal. He talks about an abscess in his liver that was literally discharging into his lung. He said it was the most intense pain ever endured. And on top of that, he had a malarious fever. By his own account, he was pretty sure he was about to die.
But then, the story just completely flips. At his request, his wife anoints him with oil, and they pray. And the Reverend reports that the second they finished praying, the fever and the awful pain were just gone, instantly. He took no medicine, he didn't see a doctor, and within a few days, he was walking half a mile.
And he doesn't stop there. He follows that up with another story, this time about a 15-year-old boy in a remote village who was crippled and near death. Missionaries prayed for him, and 6 months later, his father reports that the boy isn't just well, he's walking for the first time in his life. You can see how these accounts become the absolute bedrock for his entire argument.
So, after hitting us with these dramatic healing stories, the author pivots to the next logical question. Why do these things happen? For him, it's not just about making someone feel better. He has a much, much deeper purpose in mind. And here it is, the absolute core of his argument. He says miracles aren't the main event, they're signs. Their real purpose isn't personal comfort, it's to act as a kind of tangible proof, to confirm that the Christian message is true, especially to people who've never heard it before.
He uses this really powerful analogy. He says it's like embossed letters for the blind, like Braille. The idea is that for people who are spiritually blind, God uses these tangible signs and wonders so they can physically feel after him and find him. The miracle is a tool for evangelism.
Of course, this line of thinking immediately opens up a huge can of worms, and the author knows it. If you accept that real, divine miracles are possible, then what do you do with all the other claims of supernatural stuff out there?
And that brings us to a really fascinating part of his argument, what he calls the testimony of the adversary. He basically argues that you can't understand real miracles unless you first understand that fakes exist, or as he calls them, lying wonders.
So here's the crucial idea. The adversary, or Satan, his main tactic isn't to invent something new. It's to imitate. He resists God not by outright denial, but by mimicking and counterfeiting God's words and works. To prove his point, he brings up that Old Testament story about the Egyptian magicians who went up against Moses. Remember that? When Moses performed a miracle, they didn't say, "That's impossible." No, they tried to copy it. The author sees this as a perfect example of a true miracle versus a counterfeit one.
So, for this author, this is the whole game. The existence of fakes doesn't disprove the real thing. In his view, creating counterfeits is the #1 strategy the adversary has used throughout history to confuse and deceive people.
Okay, so if the world is filled with both genuine miracles and demonic counterfeits, how in the world are you supposed to tell them apart? Well, let's look at the framework our author provides.
He draws a really sharp line in the sand. On one side, you have divine miracles, which he says have dignified and simple methods, and always point people toward Christ. On the other side, you have the counterfeits, which he describes with this phrase, Egyptian crudeness, and says they're always tied to superstition or heresy.
And he gets super specific with his examples of what he calls spurious or counterfeit methods. He points to things like healing by touching the bones of saints, making pilgrimages to shrines, or using objects like a crucifix in an exorcism. From his 19th century Protestant view, he specifically calls these Romish miracles and frames them as clever imitations of the real deal.
And it's not just ancient history he's talking about. He applies this exact same logic to something happening in his own time, modern spiritualism. He slams its wrappings and table tippings as these impish, grotesque, and fantastic exhibitions, and lumps them right in with all the other crude, demonic counterfeits.
And this leads him to what is maybe his most surprising conclusion. Instead of seeing fakes as a reason to be skeptical, he completely flips the script. He claims that the very existence of a counterfeit proves there must be a genuine article out there to be copied. Finding fakes should just make you look even harder for the originals.
So after laying out this entire framework, the evidence, the purpose, the whole battle against counterfeits, the author doesn't just wrap it up. He ends with a direct challenge to every single person reading. He basically turns to his audience and asks, "So, do we still have this kind of faith?" He questions whether the church of his day has the boldness to actually ask God for these signs and wonders, suggesting that maybe a lack of faith is the real problem.
He closes the whole chapter by quoting this incredibly powerful prayer from the book of Acts. It's a direct plea for God to stretch out his hand to heal so that signs and wonders may be done. For him, this isn't just history, it's an urgent present-day request.
And that's what we're left with, really. Stepping into this 19th century mindset where the world is seen as this cosmic battleground between authentic and counterfeit miracles, it really forces you to ask, how do we even begin to process these intense arguments for the supernatural from our own modern and, let's face it, often deeply skeptical point of view?